Thank you, Moroi. Us horse game enthusiasts will stay strong, and I hope that your game, Team Fortress 2, will have a lot less hats in the future. In the last couple of months, the climate of SSO has become extremely negative. Even when Star Stable brings out content we've been asking for, it never seems to be enough. Now, this series of videos is trying to answer the question, why are we so angry and why has the climate of Star Stable changed so much? Now, in the previous video, we looked at horses, prices, bugs, and cheaters, and the overall experience players have in game. In this video, we're going to turn our eyes to the company and see if their actions contribute to the general animosity currently in this community. Joining me for this video is Sany Darkfall, Siren the Gamer, Max Kingmoon, Minatozy, C.C Creations, Abigail Pinehaven, Amelia Dreambell, and Eleanor Nightwalker, who will each give their own insights in the situation. Thank you all so much for joining in. I would not have been able to have done this on my own. And thank you to my coffee supporters for being, as always, the definition of awesomeness. Before we do dive into part 2, I just want to touch on a few details. The final answer to this problem will be given in part 3, and the community answers from my community posts will also be in part 3 as well, along with some excellent comments from the previous video. I'd hoped for a 2-parter for the series, but I had around 8 hours of interview footage to use, because getting content creators to share their opinions is easy, but getting them to stop is practically impossible. Off we go. Ow. We're going to start with one of the biggest problems, Star Stable making promises and then never quite fulfilling them. We have had promised blankets, better racing systems, heck, even unstated promises like getting a little house to decorate. But I'll let Eleanor Nightwalker explain a bit more.
I mean, I have been very vocal about this, and the first thing that comes to mind here was the end of year update of like 2019 or so, where they talked about updated player characters, new Dark Riders and quests, among other things. And people got so hyped up for 2020 because we were gonna get all these cool things. And then we didn't get any of that. Not even a word from the team about the plans being postponed, roadmaps for their plans, concept art or anything. And for those who remember, the Dark Riders had even been teased before that year, and we didn't get the actual Dark Riders. And then at the end of 2020, we got a blog post again promising updated Dark Riders, updated characters, updated Dark Rider quests, and a race update. And again, people got hyped. And even after announcing these things for the second time in a row, the only thing we got was concept art. And the race update has, as far as I get, not yet arrived, or not arrived yet, Jesus Christ, I can't speak. It hasn't happened yet, to my knowledge, the race update.
So many promises are still hanging, which is possibly where a lot of anger is stemming from in the older player base. It's great that they are working on the bonding and the characters, but what about all the other promises made and never kept? When will those be added to the list of things to do, and will they ever be part of that list? And if they do them, will they do them properly? Like with the updated carrying system that was essentially just a visual update, will some of these updates essentially just be set dressing? The sad thing is we do have a right to be skeptical. With so many broken promises or half-assed attempts, it's little wonder players are so damned wary.
When they say things now and want you to get excited, how can you get excited if they lie all the time? Like, they said all this stuff in the opening, their blog post or whatever, at the beginning of the year, like, oh, they're gonna add bonnets and chest plates and martingales. I don't believe that. Are you kidding me? And they gave it like this ridiculous, like, time of waiting, like, oh, we're gonna do it after summer, right? Okay, sure you are. It'll be another 2 years before they do that. I'll have gray hairs by then.
And can we really blame them? Promises have been hanging for too long, and it seems like even the ones they are working on now is taking forever to be implemented. Winning back trust is an uphill battle, and it will take a long time before players will see a promise and not instantly feel skeptical about it.
And that's how I feel about the blog posts that are happening now, that people don't take them seriously because from experience, they don't deliver what they say. So people have kind of gotten used to just taking it with a grain of salt and not actually believing that these things will happen, or that it isn't as good and as fleshed out as they may seem like.
But let's go with the outset that SSO really does mean well, that they don't mean to break promises, but instead they really do want to implement all of these wonderful features. Minatozy shared her own thoughts on why some of these problems simply do not come to fruition.
I think the bigger problem that SSO has is that they introduce these ideas that are bigger than the world, and then the actual thing is just not it. I think the biggest broken promise that SSO did is definitely the updated characters.
Oh, yeah.
They've talked about them since 2019, and every year in their blog they're like, yes, this is gonna be the year we're going to release them, they're gonna look so good, and then they just keep pushing them back.
Perhaps the bigger issue with Star Stable is not so much making promises and breaking them, but rather making promises and not being able to fulfill them due to the scope or limitations of their engine. By Glassdoor reviews, we know that their engine is outdated, and this must cause a lot of frustration for developers who need to code new features. The answer is to simply not share ideas that you are not 100% sure will be a part of your game. You only create anticipation and expectation in your player base, and if you don't deliver, you leave them with only disappointment. Now, the character model is a pretty good example of this. Instead of just adding a new character model, they opted instead to include new body types, for which every single piece of clothing in-game now needs to be adjusted to suit every single body type. And remember, they're possibly working on an outdated engine. That's not a lot of work, that's a ton of work. Can Star Stable pull this update off at all? With how some of their updates are going, I just don't know. But Star Stable does, in some ways, mean well. They don't overcomplicate the characters in order to fail, they overcomplicate it to make the players happy. And that is something we do sometimes forget. As Abigail points out, the best laid plans of mice and men don't always go to plan.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's hard for me to be annoyed because I myself, as a creator, I've said I'll do things, I'll do videos, events, and ended up not doing them. For a plethora of reasons, and I don't even have a boss or upper management telling me what I can and can't do. So it's sort of hard from my point of view, at least. I understand people will be different or have different opinions on this, but from my point of view, I understand how you can be geared up to go in one direction. Sometimes things don't align, but I won't forget to acknowledge that it does have a knock-on effect. If you say, here's a teaser, here's a fun thing, here's some items that we're going to add to the game, or here's a little spoiler video, whatever it is, and they wait 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 and it never comes, that causes distrust, and it's bound to happen in a company of that size and in a game of that size. So it's sort of I'm sort of on the end of I can understand it, but I think I see more how that would have happened in Star Stable's eyes.
Like I said earlier, sometimes they do mean well, and they really do intend to keep the promise, but life happens, or they realize it's impossible, or it's not feasible, and this creates the awkward situation of having to tell a bunch of doe-eyed kids that awesome feature you'd been hoping to add is simply not possible. That is really where communication is so very important. Players are far more understandable than you give us credit for. We get angry or upset, but if you explain to us honestly why something is not possible, most of us will understand. But once again, Star Stable should rather err on the side of caution. Rather keep a few things to your chest and let it be a surprise, than splurge it all out and let it become, again, a disappointment. But then we have to look at some of the updates they've been making, and this is where it becomes kinda difficult.
They promised very loosely better updates, and they were just trying to act like they were trying to get their shit together. But then they act like they're giving out all these good updates, but then some of the races they put into the game, you go look at spoiler accounts, and apparently that race has been in the game since 2018 and they just never released it. So what are they doing? They just took an old race and marketed it as new, maybe changed a few jumps, and that's it. And then the Horses of Jorvik thing, don't even get me started on that. I hate that. It just reused races over and over and over and over, and it's breaking promises. Again, that's not a good update. I don't want to run in a circle for 3 minutes and then act like that was fun. You know that race, that's it, the new one, that's at Valedale Lake or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
Where you jump across the... They changed it a little bit, but even if you look at the jumps, all the jumps are old. Even the flags were outdated for a little bit because they took a race that's literally been in the files. I have to find the account that said it. It's an account on Instagram. But that race had been in the files for years before they released it. And that was that whole update that 1 week, just a race.
And now we have to circle back to the issue with updates in general. By giving only bi-weekly updates, you do not only give players a better experience, but you also, by extension, give your employees a better work environment and more time to put on a product that they will be proud of. And then we won't end up with this monstrosity. That thing is a lipogorner, not a lipozoner. back on topic. Minatozy further expands on another interesting point, this time adding things we didn't really ask for nor requested.
You know, what's happening now is them promising something and then delivering it, but then they also give us another unwanted thing along with it. Like, you know, they said that they would update, you know, a few championships, and they did update them, but with, you know, the updated champ, we also got a new championship schedule that no one asked for and no one liked, because it just basically cut out so many hours that you could, you know, do the champ.
Yep.
And for example, with horse bonding, I mean, obviously everyone wants horse bonding, though it is kind of, I mean, I don't like some aspects of it, but that's for like a separate thing. But with horse bonding, we're going to get the new HUD or the UI. And, you know, that's not something that they said they would do. And I don't really know why those two have to like come as, you know, together as one. And again, SSO didn't say that they would, you know, give us this.
The point is, though, it always feels like Star Stable tampers with stuff that don't need tampering with. The cold tolerance, the sound effects, the endurance, the music, their key bindings. Everything is always getting changed or touched up, like a kid who can't stop fiddling with his new toy until he finally breaks it. But these constant changes create another issue.
And I think it's also very annoying with them, you know, changing everything so much, because now people can't even make theories because, well, the lore is so different, and also it's kind of pointless to make theories because you can make a theory about, you know, the Marchingest Castle and the fridge doors and everything, but I don't think it's gonna work.
It's like,
yeah, honestly, the Mistfall series is what blows me away the most, because it doesn't even align with the lore in SSO. So what's the point? Like, when they started advertising it, I was like, well, okay, maybe they will give us some additional information that takes a little bit too much time to put into the game, maybe give us some more spinning on theories and stuff. But no, it was just something entirely different. Yeah, and they just broke the lore. I've noticed that there's like a map in the background of the island, and it doesn't even look like Jorvik.
what, seriously?
Yeah, it's just a random map. It's not Jorvik. It's like, I don't know what they thought when they made this series. They are advertising for the game and the Mistfall area, and then it doesn't have anything to do with it. They throw in two of the characters that are actually in the game, and then they call it a day. They just say, okay, this is SSO.
Theories have become completely pointless in SSO. Why make a theory if they keep fiddling and changing the story? Why write up a cool fanfic if next week all of that could be completely reset? All of these changes make players disconnect further and further from the story, the characters, the world, and the game. Consistency is extremely important. Retconning your story over and over again does nothing good for either the story or your player base. But what's even a little worse are those promises that are made to hook you, but that never had any intention of being fulfilled.
And we also have misinformation and false advertisement happening, such as those swimming magic horses some years back, or the countless of pictures of our character interacting with each other and our horses. I think that over time players have developed trust issues, to be honest.
Yes.
I know that I have, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a long-term issue that has been going on for years, and the community is at last fed up. Like, we know how things work now. We know that even though they say that something is happening, we cannot guarantee that it will.
Advertisements have become one of the best parts of Star Stable, and yes, they lie. From promising to build a bond with your horse, to the epic Rune Runner, which was just a reskin of another horse, to the interactions with other players, to the petting of horses, the petting of pets, and so many other advertisements that promise so much more and then never deliver. These are also broken promises, albeit a bit more devious, as they hook you, but they never deliver. But for the final point, I will leave it to Sandy.
They are trying to fix it. That is why they added some things that we maybe wanted, like for example, the movie/RP community that has been wanting the full-out camera for years and had to bug into a way to actually use it, finally got it after so many years, because they took too long for them to do that. But sure, they did fix it, which is great, but took way too long.
Let's be fair, it did take them a long time to get to these changes, And perhaps that's the reason why people are so angry, that after years and years and years of waiting, they're only now getting to fulfilling promises that they made years ago. But we have to acknowledge that they are now trying to fulfill them, and that is a step in the right direction. Sort of, because even when Star Stable is hearing a bit better, they don't always listen too well. Taking the example that Minatozy mentioned earlier about the character models, we now have this interesting issue where players do feel like they're yelling into the void. Some players have noted that Star Stable picks and chooses the comments that they will reply to, that they've deliberately selected positive people to test those models out for the character update, and that they even go so far as to ignore more negative comments. I went ahead and checked this on a few of their character model posts, and although I can't say that they directly ignore all negative comments, I do feel that they do respond a lot more to positive. But this is a case of actually feeling ignored, like with the HUD.
I think it's so interesting how, they release something, and I don't know, when they showcased the new HUD and everyone criticized it and, told SSO how they improve it, and they basically ignored all of those comments and just, replied to, only positive ones. I think that's a big problem that they have.
Why ask for feedback if you're not going to listen? Like with the Frisian, we all remember this fiasco. Star Stable asked for feedback on their brand new Frisian model. They got feedback, ignored the feedback, and essentially released the horse as it is. In some cases they do listen though, like with the dragon horsetails. They changed them to look a little less icky. And this is a good example of where our requests are heard and implemented. But then we have to look at the other side, and Max brings us another bit of perspective.
I feel like it happens from both sides. There's certain things that Star Stable listens to, and there's certain things that Star Stable doesn't listen to. And I feel like we as a community do the same thing. That's going back to like them actually listening to us, and they're like, look, you asked this from us, we give you what you asked for, and we're like, that's not what we asked for, but it's what we asked for. I feel like we're not understanding what Star Stable is understanding from what we want.
And I do agree. Many times after SSO has made changes or fixed issues or added a specifically requested update, we often find a slew of players just complaining about the update or change. I get it, it's not always what we expect, but it's as if we can't even acknowledge when Star Stable tries to fix a problem. I'll use the latest update as an example. The players ask Star Stable to allow horses to jump quickly, essentially to bunny hop. This is something that I've personally had a huge problem with. Star Stable implemented it, but it changed the movement of the horses somewhat. They now look like they're gliding on the surface of the floor. It did not take long for players to start screaming about it. We do tend to see the worst in updates instead of trying to acknowledge the good, like the jumping update. That's pretty cool, and although yes, there are some hiccups with the sliding, and yes, the dressage communities are gonna have a devil of a time getting used to it, I will say I'm pretty happy that my horse can finally double jump. But I don't hear a lot of players say that. And the reason for that could be that, well, players just don't really feel appreciated.
When I was doing Star Stable content full time, it was the case of I got so invested in Star Stable and in the company and everything that was happening that I felt like, I wasn't being listened to. I felt like I was nothing. I felt like I was inadequate. It didn't matter that I had somewhat of an audience. They weren't going to listen to me. They never had. And so it did hurt me. I'm not going to lie to you. It sucked. And I think that is, the biggest, if not the main reason why I sort of stepped away from Star Stable content is just, I didn't feel like the team cared, and my, something I cared very dearly about, which is my channel, was on the line for that. So, I can understand why people, might see that as a huge, huge issue.
This is actually partly the reason why I started to move away from SSO as well. As hard as we pushed and as hard as we yelled, or even how big our videos blew up, it felt like our voices were simply ignored. But although we might feel like we're getting ignored, it is sometimes a good idea to look at the whole picture and not just one corner, because there is context to these situations.
But then as I took a step away, it was sort of like I could see it in a more critical light, and I could see, okay, as I said before, you got your social media team, they talk to the support team talk to the dev then, respond to upper management. And so who do you actually need to get the attention of? It's not social media, it's not support, it's not even the devs, it's the upper management. How do you get their attention? As I explained in my How to Save Star Stable video, you go on stuff like Starcoin strikes. But again, circling back to what I said before, it's incredibly hard to get people unified. So I can understand why, you know, people might feel like the social media team hear them. They you know, they read tons and tons. The support team probably read tons and tons and tons. And then, you know, they log onto the game and nothing has changed. And it's mostly because the social media team is not going to have like huge influence over upper management. Upper management is, to boil it down, they're looking at statistics. If they see, okay, they released a horsey and they went up in sales, great. They released a mermaid outfit, it went up in sales, great. They're checking their boxes essentially, and the social media team is sitting there and they're like, yes, we understand your frustration. We're working on it. Please stop yelling at me. You know, I can understand. Like, I do not envy their job. I really don't.
The social media team is not our enemy. They really are not. It does feel like this, I know. And yes, I will get to this copy-paste responses in a bit and this whole situation in a bit, but we do need to remember that no matter how we feel, the social media teams are given scripts to work off from. And if they share these ideas, it will only come to fruition if upper management decides it must be so. And in this, I want to give it over to Sandy again, because although it feels like they don't listen, they actually listen more than we realize.
I believe that Star Stable is doing much better on responding to Instagram comments, etc. They're responding in a way better tone than they used to.
Yeah.
And the fact that they actually are responding is also a miracle. It's really great. Good job. But still not listening 100%. They did listen to us now though, because we were complaining that we wanted the snow still in Star Stable, because they removed it so quickly. And here in Sweden, we have snow pretty much until Mars, more or less, depending where you are in the country. So that they added it back because of high demand, that was a good job. I was really surprised that they did that, and I did not think that they would.
For those older players watching, sit back for a moment and think about a feature that was not part of the game 10 years ago, and try to think about the fact that they added that after players requested it. Star Stable doesn't always stick the landing, but give this to them. They do keep trying. Let's hope that they have a chance to show that they do listen with the Lipizaners. Please. Please listen. But now let's get into a slightly more negative topic, or an even more negative topic. Excuses. Whether they listen or not, or break promises or not, one thing Star Stable always has waiting in the wings is an excuse for why things don't pan out. To be clear, these are not reasons, they are excuses. There is a clear difference between a reason and an excuse, which I will explain. A reason is considered a fair and logical justification for not participating in something. An excuse is a pretense or a subterfuge that can logically be overcome. For example, will you come with me to the dance? A reason is no, because I will be in surgery. An excuse is, no, I have the dishes to do that night. Star Stable gives excuses as reasons, but I'd like to show how many of these reasons simply do not add up. I'm going to be using two examples for this section. The first is a newer issue, the Halloween Festival, and the second is an older issue, Jorvik Schillingscap. Let's start with the Halloween Festival. For those of you who might not know, Halloween for 2022 went like this. You had 5 portals you had to open with crystals. The amount of crystals you needed to open every portal varied. You got around 2 crystals a day, and so many players quit because it was such a grind and it took you so long to get these crystals that people just didn't want to play. This was a stark contrast to the year before, where all the portals were immediately available from the get-go. This caused a serious unrest and anger in the community, and many simply didn't even bother finishing these quests, myself included. When asked about this sudden change, Star Stable's reason for why they made it like this was, according to their blog post, because we wanted to give players autonomy for which portals they opened first. Okay, let's unpack, and I'm going to let Max do that for us.
Yeah. No, I just realized that the statement that the thing that you just said, it doesn't make sense because all the portals were different prices. There were ones like, I'm pretty sure there was one for like 5 crystals and there was one for 40 crystal. Like,
yeah, I forgot about that.
Where's the choice then? Because you're obviously opening the cheaper one first. It's kind of obvious that that's a lie.
Damn straight. We could, in any case, choose which portals to open since forever, because we could instantly choose which portal to open first. Furthermore, as Max pointed out, all the portals were different prices, which meant that even if you wanted to open a certain portal, it would still mean you'd have to wait longer for some. So most people would open the first least expensive one first, taking away autonomy. So why did they really do this? What's the actual reason, not the excuse? Now, remember, reason is logic, so we're going to look at a logical reason. The more logical reason was to extend player game time. Star Stable has, most likely, a very interesting issue of audience retention. Essentially, the amount of time a piece of media will keep a person's attention before they go look for something else to do. Although mostly used for films, series, and, you guessed it, YouTube videos, it certainly applies to games as well, especially online games. I know a lot of players who simply log on, buy a horse and leave, or they log on, do a quest and leave. So why does this matter? Essentially, the more time you spend in the game, the more you're more likely to spend, or the more tempted you might get to spend. So they almost forced players to stay in the game longer by placing arbitrary roadblocks on the portals. This meant players stayed in game longer, player game time went up, and shareholders were happy. It's a far more logical reason for why they would do that, isn't it? But the problem with this strategy is that it, I believe, backfired. Players were upset enough for it to be mentioned in the interview with Stacy.
Halloween has now come and gone, and I think it's safe to say that there were a lot of opinions, both good and bad, of course. I think people seemed to be quite, especially, I guess, displeased or disappointed in like the unclear instructions and the low odds of getting the blue pumpkin. As well as the tornado and like soul shard grind and the ratio and stuff, and also the fact that they initially gave character XP.
By giving the excuse, we wanted to give you some autonomy, makes it seem like the decision came down to trying to make us happy, which is why it backfired. How would locking portals and adding a grind make players happy? Now, before I go off on another tangent, let's rather move on to Jorvik Shillings. For Jorvik Shillings, just to cover it, is a currency you can get in-game. You get it through racing and completing quests. The Jorvik Shilling is capped at 10,000.
I think it's bullshit.
Nice.
They could have at least like put it to 50k or something. To have 10k as a cap while there are clothing items that cost 10k, that is terrible. And that they refuse to up it is such bullshit.
And the reason why they don't change it is because it would break the fragile economy.
We have currently like set guidelines for how things should be priced, and even I think sometimes things are a bit too high. We probably need to look at bringing it down. But yeah, increasing the shilling wallet would be a much bigger disruption to the economy than even I expected. So that's what I've kind of been told, and I have to rely on the people that know about it a bit more than me. We don't want to touch it, really. No. It's very fragile.
Take it away, Max.
What fragile? It can't. It's already fragile because they're limiting it. How is that? How? That's not gonna break anything.
I felt the exact same way. How could an economy become hurt if there is no economy? Now, some of you might be confused because if there's currency, there should of course be some sort of economy, but that's not really how it works. An economy in its most basic sense is the way people spend money and the way people make money. So how do we make money? By racing and completing quests. How do we spend money? By buying items and horses from NPC merchants. Now, the economy structure is based around how these two elements, making money or buying money, are interlinked, specifically between players. When players can trade between each other, the values of items rise and fall depending on the demand for that item and the amount of money currently in circulation. I won't go into too many details, but essentially, more currency in the economy will equal a diminished value in that currency, which will equal higher prices because more money means it will have less value. So for every new player that comes into a game like Star Stable, that means an extra 400 star coins is added to the currency every month, and that should boost up the prices. But this doesn't happen because Star Stable does not have a living economy. It has a stagnant economy. Because the buying and purchasing is solely linked to NPC merchants and not to players, which means players do not determine the value of items, which means the players do not determine the price of those items, which means they cannot go up and cannot go down on price, which means there is no economy to balance. Star Stable has a perfectly controllable, stagnant economy that they can change at a whim.
Oh, okay. Now that you framed it that way, no, I agree. You're right. There's no like exchange between players. You know, I can't sell something to someone. I can't lease out my horse. So, yeah. Now that you framed it in that light, I'm like, yeah, that actually makes less sense than it did before. That's a good point. I mean, I'd be completely open to hearing maybe somebody in a more game dev situation to be able to explain to us sort of what she might have meant by the economy is fragile, but from an outsider perspective, yeah, that doesn't quite add up.
Which is exactly what I went and did. I let a developer, or someone who at least knows development a bit more than I do, explain it a little better. When you're talking about a free-to-play game, economy really covers two distinct things: the actual balance, sources, and sinks of in-game resources, as well as how real-world revenue flows into and out of the game. Most of what you're describing above is bog-standard free-to-play game dual currency setup. Currency caps are generally good for the health of a game because it prevents players saving up and not spending. If the game, like most free-to-play games, has new content coming out regularly, new mounts and gear in this example likely, then allowing players to save might mean players build up a bank between patches and then spend it at once, getting all the new content immediately. That's bad for the game's health. Steadier play is better than huge spikes and droughts, as well as the game's business model. With a currency cap, they might buy the free currency or convert paid to free currency, and without one they have no reason to spend at all. There's a whole lot more to game economies than that, of course, but if you're looking for a reason lifting a currency cap can hurt a game, that's the short version. Sometimes it's even just perceptual. The biggest thing a game economy does is create shortages, so players feel a need to get it. As soon as a currency can be hoarded in enough surplus as to become irrelevant, a whole lot of game features stop mattering, and players quit very quickly when they run out of new stuff to get in a game. So with all of this in mind, what could be the reason for why they are capping the Jorvik shillings? As explained by Triox50, in my honest opinion, it would only influence the amount of P currency or paying currency sold to the player. The cap seems to have been implemented for that sole reason, not for economy reasons. Hell, is there even a real economy to speak of if players basically can't interact with money? When a player sells an object, this added to the merchant's stock and then purchased by another player, and vice versa. If a player buys an object, does the merchant have one less of this object? If the game just destroys and duplicates objects when bought and sold, then there really isn't much of an economy in the game, and changing the cap would most definitely not change anything about your in-game economy. The reason they are most likely not upping this is because it would mean players will not be pushed into buying more stuff. You can't, for example, save up for festivals and simply splurge, and so when a festival comes around, you're more tempted to buy star coins because it's tiring to collect Jorvik shillings and you have a time frame on top of that. And there you have it. Star Stable's excuse in this case makes no sense, and players are not that stupid. We pick up on stuff like this, or in my case, asked about stuff like this. They think and learn, and then when they realize that they've been essentially lied to, they get angry.
No, the reason they don't increase the cap is because they want people to spend star coins instead of shillings. Like, that's it.
Yeah, it's gonna ruin the economy. It's gonna ruin their economy, you know?
Yeah, not the Jorvik economy, just the SSO economy.
A quick addendum. After rewatching the interview with the Stacey Place, I realized that they do make a connection between the in-game currency and their own company's revenue. This is not a fact that they hide, but my issue is this. They are treating their paid game like a free-to-play game. In my original post on Reddit, I never used the term free-to-play in my post. This is an assumption this guy made after I explained the structure of SSO's economy. Star Stable really does run as a free-to-play game. Think about most mobile games real quick. You have a free currency and a paid currency. The paid one usually being represented like this. And as we all know, most, if not all, mobile games are free. These structures that they have put in place, like the Jorvik shilling caps, is only there to push you to buy more star coins on top of purchasing the full $70 game.
I'm sorry, but this is one of the least greedy companies I've ever worked for.
I am having an extremely hard time believing this. But now we have to talk about a slightly different issue, and this is something that happened recently and one that did not help the community's current anger at all. A little more than a week ago, there was a situation in the game in which players would stay overnight in game. Some quests actually request this. You have to stay overnight so that you can continue the quest the next day. Otherwise, you literally have to go to bed and wake up and then continue playing. Some players will spend 75 star coins to sleep over in-game and then continue with the story immediately. Now, a lot of players were having some trouble. When they stayed overnight, the quest didn't continue. So the game essentially swallowed 75 star coins, and when players reported this to Star Stable, their reaction was, "Hello. We will not be offering refunds for this bug for players that chose to pay to stay the night. Our team was recently made aware of the bug and is working on fixing this as quickly as possible, so we recommend staying patient when encountering bugs." You can imagine the backlash after they kind of told players, yeah, it's not our problem that our game stole money from you. About a day or so later, they make a second post. "Hey Star Fam, some of you couldn't continue Ant's quest due to the day blocker still being present. Some found a workaround that cost Star Coin. We are typically unable to offer refunds, but we hear you, and in this case, we will make an exception. If you believe you were impacted, please contact our support team, and we'll investigate if this applies to you and issue a Star Coin refund accordingly. Thanks for your patience and understanding, and we hope you have a great time getting to know Anne better." I will commend them for issuing refunds. I will condemn them for the fact that we had to scream before they gave refunds. These are the types of things that push players to the edge, that make us angry, that make us bitter, and then make us feel that you treat us like kids or fools, or even worse, like we don't matter. It might not be true, but this is how I personally would feel if I lost money on your game and your response was to shrug and say it's my problem. But let's move into the final topic for this video, influencers and our influence.
Wow. I will preface this by saying I hate the word influencer. Strong start, I know. Personally, the way I see influencers is like, to me, an influencer is someone who's selling me a product. I consider most, if not all, Star Stable influencers content creators because, you know, a lot of them aren't trying to get you to buy Star Stable or pay for Star Coins. A lot of them are just trying to entertain you.
And as for you calling it influencers / content creators, I think that we don't need to correct you on that, because when we have an influence on people, we are also influencers. Like, we are mainly content creators, but as long as our audience is influenced, we are also influencers.
They don't agree. Fight. In my brief time as a content creator, I have come to realize that whatever I say will, in some way, good or bad, influence the way people perceive the game or topic I am talking about, especially if I present my thoughts and reviews with good arguments. I am absolutely of the opinion that we as content creators have an influence on the community, and in this case, Eleanor Nightwalker does agree with me.
I 100% believe that influencers do have an influence on the community. It's kind of like with conspiracy theories and radicalization and all of that kind of stuff as well, that when you're fed a certain type of information and someone makes very compelling arguments, you will eventually be drawn in and convinced that that is how it is. So if you're watching YouTubers that are very positive and only highlight the things that you like or they like, you may form the opinion that the game is improving and the devs know that what the players want and everyone's happy, because that's what you've heard. And then on the other hand, if you watch YouTubers that are very critical and highlights the issues, you may form the opinion that the game is dying and that nobody cares because that's what you've heard. So personally, I'm trying to be somewhere in between and to choose my battles wisely before speaking out publicly. But it's very easy to be drawn to one side. An influential platform comes with like a lot of power and responsibility because there are people who look up to you and will be affected by the things that you say and do. And the best thing would be to help those people see both the good and the bad, but it's not easy.
It's like the illusory truth effect. The illusory truth effect, also known as the illusion of truth, describes how when we hear the same false information repeated again and again, we often come to believe it is true. This can be applied to marketing, where if you tell someone 5 times through different mediums or personalities that this is the best horse game ever, whether this is true or not, you will start to believe it. The only problem with the game is we can taste and compare and see it for what it is. But convincing players not to be so easily influenced is difficult though. And in Star Stable's case, it's doubly so, as Max and Sandy point out the reason.
I don't like calling it influencers. What do I call it? Like content creators.
Yeah, content creators, that's a better
That's
word.
the
Yeah.
word.
That's the
not
word.
Influencers.
Not influencers, you're right.
There's a bunch of YouTube content creators who like to complain about the game, and I think that's fine, right? You're entitled to your own opinion, but what they don't realize is that a lot of people who watch them are younger, and they're gonna hop on that. They're gonna agree with everything you say.
Yep.
And that's also fueling all the anger.
There's nothing wrong with kids being the main audience. As long as they are behaving and doing as they should online, don't spread the personal information, etc., and just respect people as they want to be respected. But sure, comments can come in various ways. Kids have a tendency to really tell you how they really feel without having a filter. So honesty really comes out in a different light than with adults, I would say.
Yeah, that's the thing, because they are very young and very impressionable, so they will listen to everything. They will soak up all the information that they get from the internet. So definitely, we as especially SSO content creators do have a huge responsibility to the things that we say and what kind of influence we have on the audience.
Kids are very impressionable. They will take a lot of what we say seriously. Like with Star Stable Online United April Fool's joke, many players of SSO thought the game was really closing. It got so bad that SSO had to make a statement that no, the game is not in fact closing, this was a joke. So, by this account, there is some truth to being cautious about how we approach and discuss certain topics and what jokes we make. But then, the other issue is, unfortunately, that negativity sells.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like really negative, like on YouTube or I guess maybe even Instagram, if you like title the video something very negative, it's gonna get like much more views. I kind of noticed that when I was doing videos on the advent calendar gifts, if the gift was good and the title was good, I wouldn't get as many views as if I were like, oh no, this is so bad, and like that's so funny. And I think it's kind of hard to then kind of, not make those kinds of videos and titles and thumbnails, as an influencer.
Negativity is one of the biggest sellers on YouTube, and as a result, content creators and influencers will start feeding off of negativity in order to feed the beast, so to speak. We must stay relevant somehow, and so some will resort to pushing for negative content in order to do so. But here's the thing, negative content can only be popular if it is actually also honest. Saying a good game is terrible will not get the same amount of views as saying a bad game is terrible, because people will watch videos they agree with. Hate watchers of course exist, but they are in the extreme minority. Essentially, the only way for negative content to become popular is if it's true. However, one extremely compelling point was made by Abigail.
For the purpose of this interview, I will reference influencers, and just in case I come off topic here, I just want to say, when I say the word influencers, I mean specifically people who either solely do Star Stable content or mostly Star Stable content. A thought I had, and I wanted to mention this because I think I'm kind of onto something here. I put down, if anything, influencers influence each other the most. Now, what do I mean by this? Trends, view counts, popular styles of videos, they sort of have a death grip on Star Stable influencers, and this isn't necessarily their fault. It can sort of fall down to the algorithm, since creativity, nuance, and usually passion as well are overridden by the same old popular content. You've got your buying horses and Instagram chooses the horse I buy, or spoilers. Star Stable spoilers is a big one, or even hot button topics like, Star Stable sucks, or Star Stable's failing, or videos sort of discussing sort of the downfall. It's sort of like doom scrolling. We kind of want to hear about drama and we want to hear about the stuff that's going wrong. However, this also then means that it's almost like an echo chamber, the Star Stable community. If one thing does really well, there's going to be more people talking about that one thing, and that isn't necessarily because one person decided to talk about it. It's just what the algorithm pushed out to everybody.
For those aspiring YouTubers, here's an old trick to grow on YouTube. Pick a topic. Go search for it, and if videos on that topic have more views than the channel has subscribers, then that is a good topic to talk about. We will always influence each other to some capacity, because we all want to grow and make sure that people see our videos. And through that, certain topics will be rushed through the community in quick succession. And this will of course support the illusionary effect and push players into believing specific things because they've heard it enough to believe it. But yes, we certainly, I believe, influence the content, and by extension we influence the audience. Although not as much as we'd like to believe, Abigail does expand on this point further, speaking about the community as a whole and its size and how it's growing or how it's not growing. Now, I will leave this topic for the final video in the series, but for now, let's give a listen to Siren the Gamer.
I also think the climate of SSO has changed because of SSO YouTubers and the community. Now, we are influencers, so we have a lot of responsibility in how we influence others, but I feel like we are held up way too high in terms of what standards we should meet as influencers, because in reality, we literally are just players. I've spoken about it before, how a lot of players are either 100% loving SSO or they just 100% don't like it. It's like you aren't allowed to be middle ground. Nobody can be pleased. If you like a horse, people are mad at you for it. If you dislike a horse, people are mad at you for it. It's a lot of petty fighting over nothing. Players get mad at the game and then take their hatred out on YouTubers. It's just a lot of unhappy vibes, and when SSO does something good, people may still be mad at them. SSO is a big reason why players may be angry, but the community is also at fault too for the way they cause nearly political fights over horses or quests. But regardless, your anger for a game is not an excuse to be a bad person. It's just sad the game has come to this, and it's no fair that everything is now like a fight now. It's like you can't be content and just play the game. It's like you literally have to pick sides or people are going to be mad at you. Like, there's a lot of people who demand that YouTubers make like really, really in-depth analytical responses towards horses in the game, but like in reality, like as a player myself, when I see a new horse come out into the game, I don't always have to like debate over it. Like, there's times where I just see the horse or a quest and go, oh, that's cool, and then move on at my day, because it's okay to enjoy games and not take it seriously. But you're held up to a standard, and if you don't meet the standard, then people will send you hate for it. But what I've realized is that it's not my community, it is Star Stable's community that is upset. So what I've realized is that for me to be happy playing the game has to improve, but I also need to block out the opinions of the community. But like, hear me out. Sometimes if you like a game, people will tell you how bad it is to convince you to dislike it. Then you might follow that crowd. Maybe the game has issues, but the more people remind you of it, the more you may feel upset. Your view becomes corrupted. Yeah, the movie or game might have a problem, but you are still allowed to enjoy things. And my point is that people in this community really, really do try to bring you down to their level, and if they hate the game, now you have to hate the game. If you don't agree with them, you're a terrible player. It's like a competition for who could be the best player and who has the best opinions in a game. Like, don't get me wrong, the game does have issues. However, the community also is a huge problem for the way they treat YouTubers as well as the game itself. Quite frankly, since I have recently discovered that I actually have CPTSD and I recently experienced psychosis, I have not been doing well lately, and logging onto a horse game to just be bombarded by unhappy players is just not cool when you want an escape from reality. I've been told before by the people in the SSO community that nobody even cares about me. They care about the game, not me. So of course, I've moved over to a new channel I made about books, animal rights, mythology. I've just decided to build up a community that actually cares about me, and then keep my gaming channel to talk about the game on my own time in a relaxed way, because I don't want to take the game seriously. Like, I could play the game for fun because, like, at the end of the day, I'm a player. I'm not like a robot, you know what I mean? Like, I have feelings too. But my point is that it's sad that players break up friendships over this, and it's like no one knows how to properly be polite and talk to each other nicely. We could just play for fun and be constructive towards the game. There's no reason for sending people hate over an opinion in the game. You being hateful doesn't accomplish anything but make people want to leave the game. And if people keep leaving the game, we'll have no game to play because everybody quit. I hope all of that made sense.
The community has become, at least to some, a lot more negative than not. This is another facet I've heard from content creators. Our players become vicious in their demands, almost bullying. Some flee social media entirely, as I've done. Others simply grin and bear it. Or, like in the case of Siren, they simply move on to something else. I don't know what to make of this. It is quite disturbing that our own audience has become so aggressive and so vicious that they would actually push people away from topics that they love talking about. In the case of Abigail, for example, she moved away from this because she felt like she wasn't being acknowledged. In the case of myself and Siren and perhaps other content creators, we find ourselves in this unenviable position where our viewer base is almost constantly negative. And this only feeds off of each other. Because as Sandy pointed out earlier, you either have players who absolutely love your content or you have players who absolutely despise your content. It feels like there is no middle ground to be found, as if there is only these extremes that we will forever have within this player base. But that's the interesting part for me, that they do have these extremes, and that through these extremes we have bred this almost warlike community, where if one person says something negative about a game, they are almost instantly attacked by everyone. And I've seen this so many times, it's almost laughable. And again, if someone says something positive about the game, they are being attacked almost instantly and told that they're fools for liking the game. There is no middle ground. But in the next topic, we're going to be looking at both of these sides to see what people hate about the game, what they love about the game, and why they have those differing opinions. Because listening to the community as a whole is really the whole point. They, at the end of the day, have the strongest voice. No matter how much we as content creators believe that we do, it is always the community that will have the sway. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for watching part 3. Thank you all so much for watching part 2. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for watching part 2. Part 3 will be up soon. I need to speak in my Star Stable voice. It's the only way I don't frickin' stutter.